All right, so we will kick off here. Our agendas are getting increasingly beautiful. I think Michael's having a hand in formatting everything very nicely, so thank you for that.
No
And I'm
problem.
continuing to copy the formats forward. So I went in and have some updates at the top. Let me go ahead and share that and start talking over some stuff that's new. All right, so Google Summer of Code midterm evaluations got done last week. I think they both went well. I think our students are doing awesomely, our interns. So I think both the Geppetto project and the OpenWorm project are progressing quite well. When Mark joins us here a little bit later, hopefully we'll get to update on some of the stuff he's doing. But yeah, I think it's been going quite well. Waffle Board continues to be updated. I just want to remind everybody that it exists, and as you're working on stuff, to keep iterating things. I know that the Geppetto project is, Geppetto guys are doing this a lot, probably more than some of the rest of us, but this is kind of the big picture of across all of our different repos, so do try to move things into in progress if they're in progress, and close them out if they're closed out, all that good stuff, in addition to our kind of updates here. All right, a couple things from me. There's been a flood of new volunteers in the last several weeks. We did a couple things, as I sort of mentioned this before, but I'll sort of say it again. So we used to have a process where and I don't know, some of you may have signed up on this form, where after you sign up on the form, you would get a mail saying, "Oh, we're going to have another volunteer orientation at some point, and we'll invite you to it." And we lost a ton of people in the weeks between when they signed up and showing up in the orientation, and then even then, when people got oriented, they kind of didn't do very much. Not everybody, but as worked out well with Michael, because we didn't do that. I met him one-on-one and just talked directly, and that, I don't know, maybe Michael, you would have participated no matter what, but anyway, I'll take my chances to say that it seems like one-on-one orientation seemed to work well. But okay, so that kind of works fine in the steady state, but then we took this additional step last week, which I don't know, maybe now in revision shouldn't have done, but so there had been all these people who had like come in but hadn't ever gotten one-on-one orientations, and decided to just email all of them who basically, over the last, who had signed up over maybe the last 2 or 3 months, and say, just sort of saying like, hey, we never got a chance, to pull you an orientation, but here, if you want to sign up for one, you can sign up for a one-on-one interview with me. And so I think we had like 20 or 25 people like this, which I felt mortified that we had not like gotten back to them before. So I'm glad that we did. But yeah, like 7 of them like all came back and scheduled stuff for this next week. So so it's been a little crazy for me, just kind of orienting folks and kind of bringing folks in. I handed off one to Giovanni. I handed off one to Matteo. It's sort of like because it was in their time zone kind of thing. I think that after this week it's going to calm back down again because we don't have this backlog, and it'll just be like as people start showing up. But everybody, the people who volunteer are awesome people. I mean, all of them are really cool. It's awesome that they want to help out. They're very curious. They have all sorts of interesting backgrounds, and obviously we want to make sure that they can find a way to get into the project if they want to. So as people, I've been pointing people to various things within the project that seems to be within their interest. So if folks start mailing on the list, please help them out. That's basically what I've directed a lot of them to do, is just try to build stuff and try to work on stuff and if they can't build something, to lead issues and that kind of thing. So hopefully more people are coming in, and then hopefully it'll calm down after this week. But I just want to let everybody know and give people a heads up that's been happening, and you may see some questions coming in. And so if there is a question that you can help with, please do. I am I have somewhat limited time. Okay. All right. The other thing that will be taking up some time is that sort of turn our attention again to journal clubs. And we have a few of those that are backed up that we talked about, I think, in the past, but just kind of to reiterate. So on my radar is the 2 papers on the neurobiology of locomotion that came out in like March and April. I want to do that. I want to actually personally give that one because I think it's really at the core of what we're doing here. And the science is non-trivial, and reading the papers is sort of like at a cursory level, like you kind of read it, you get it. But to actually dive in and understand the competing theories of how the nervous system is producing a locomotion is actually pretty interesting. And still in 2014, both authors write the fact that we continue to work on, which is that we have not settled on a theory for how locomotion is produced by the nervous system for the worm, right? It's kind of like the biologists are no further along on this. I mean, it's not that they're no further along, but they don't have an answer. They don't have a definite answer. And so we have an opportunity to inform that. And so I want to do a journal club that looks over these most recent papers to do that. That's one. Another is that I reached out to Rick Gherkin, who we may not be familiar with here. I think there have been some interactions maybe, but he has a framework that he'd like to share with the group and describe it. It's called PSI-Unit. I'm not as familiar with it as I could be, but it comes from the world of informatics, and it helps the organization of information. So, and he's very eager to cross it over into OpenWorm, and I'd like to help facilitate that. So I think giving him a chance to talk about it in Journal Club would be appropriate. So that's another one. Then this development work that I posted about on the mailing list, I think those guys also should present, and they're up for it as well to kind of talk about what's been happening on this computational development project. So that's a third one. And then I'm actually going to be in Boston next week, and I reached out to Ed Boyden, who was involved in the most recent paper on imaging. Of course, that work is essentially an extension of the work that we already had the Journal Club on with the folks in Vienna, the Flashing Lights Journal Club. But anyway, I reached out, and since he also wrote us on the mailing list, and I just want to see, what additional things he might be willing to present that might be on the radar. And okay, so that's kind of what I have in mind. As always, if folks want to suggest other topics, please do, and we will queue them up. But I think it's been a while since we haven't had a journal club, and I think it'd be nice to get to do that. So look forward to that. Okay, and then release 7. So I think 2 days ago on GitHub, our release 6. Hi, Rainer. I think there might be some background noise from you. So it's nice to see you, but could you mute if you're shuffling papers? Sorry. Okay, thanks. Okay, so release 7, I had a chance to chat with a few folks. So looking ahead to release 7, what I was saying there was a couple days ago, our milestones for release 6 expired. I think they were going to end June 30th, and I know pretty soon after they expire, folks start feeling uncomfortable because on GitHub they look, expired, and folks don't like it looking expired. So yeah, actually we go have a look right now because we do point people at the milestones. I think it's important that they just don't look really stale, because then folks wonder why they're stale. So let's just confirm what that looks like. We go into issues and milestones. Yeah, right. Past due by 2 days. So, and that just keeps getting worse as we go. So I'm eager to clean those up, and but not just delete them. So I started some conversations with folks. Last week I met with Porig. Thanks for taking the time. So I have put out the link there for scheduling, but I will be more proactive this week and send mails around to folks who I have not met with specifically. But please, when you get that, do sign up and let's talk about what your thoughts are for the next go around, and we will get those milestones cleaned up. Okay, right. That's the basic story there. And then, yeah, for release 6, for some of these things where we, you know, we certainly made a lot of progress. For some things, there are folks. This dovetails with the volunteers. There are folks who are coming in who say like express interest in machine learning, and I pointed them like at Tom's Journal Club, for example, and said, you know, if you're interested in machine learning, check this out and check out this thread on the mailing list where Tom and Ford are going back and forth on C302, and so folks are like, okay, well that's interesting. And then other folks are like, yeah, I have, you know, C++ and Python experiences or something that I can do between C++ and Python, and I'm like, well, yeah, actually, you know, we'd like to, you know, we'd like to cross over what we're doing with the C302 stuff with this cybernetic code base, and here we have this Python script that does that. And so I've been kind of strategically trying to, you know, put more energy into some of these places where, you know, our milestones have suggested that we wanted to go. So hopefully those folks, I mean, the first step is always, I say, like, go build stuff, and then if you can build the stuff, then come back and we'll talk about next steps. So hopefully folks are getting through that. I'm going to continue to poke them too if I haven't heard from them. But those are all kind of falling under the release 6 milestones, and so it's up to us to chart the course so that when folks come in, we can kind of give them a spot and point them forward. And I'm eager as well to be able to point stuff into the movement validation stuff. So Michael, I don't know if you got a chance to kind of summarize like from the beginning to the end. I think maybe I had just offhandedly last time suggested if you can provide us a more summary update on where that is during your update. But if not, that's okay. We can do it next time too. That's the one project.
Sure.
Okay, that's the one project where I've sometimes when folks come in and I'm like, you know, I kind of want to push some volunteers in your direction, but you guys like, I guess I don't yet know what is the small atom that people could get to move that in. So maybe if you update as well, you can help me understand how I can point more volunteers towards that. But okay, I've been talking too long. I think oh yes, and then I mean I'll let Andre talk about it, but you know I continue to work on the SPH paper. I continue to meet with Rainer, and we've done some cool stuff there. We're for the and the perspectives article, of course. You know, I think we got some reviews back on that, and hopefully, I think Balash is going to be able to move that forward. I did want to say as well that we've had some additional feedback and contact from John White, happily. He continues to participate and being very encouraging in the project. This was actually related to some of the development questions. So on the development side, folks are curious to see the sizes of cells as they divide in the embryo. And I asked John White, hey, do you happen to have any data on that? And I mean, this is a guy who is, I believe, not actively running a lab today. So he's not like actively scientist. But yeah, he sent off a mail to a postdoc back in his old institution and asked him to dig up any data that he might find. And he put 850 megabytes of images up on his server just because I kind of asked like if he happened to know like if there was data like this available. So so John White is incredibly helpful and supportive of this project, and I'm just so thrilled of that. So I just kind of wanted to say that publicly and have everybody know how helpful they're being. And then I've also heard that there might be some new developments with transferring the videos from the Schaefer lab into a place where we can get more access to them, actually. That's still in the works, but I think they're more open to that than they have been in the past. And so I'm excited to see that actually happen as well. I've got some thoughts on how to make that available. But so lots of good stuff is coming together. Okay, I said I was going to move on to you guys. So let's do that. I'll share the screen. If anybody has any questions about anything I said, feel free to just jump in, by the way. But otherwise, we'll go to Andre. Who is not here. Okay, sorry. A little bit on autopilot. Okay, let's go to somebody who is here, Matteo, and I'm going to go see if Andre is having some trouble connecting or something. Matteo.
Hello.
How are you?
So,
Can you guys
good.
hear me fine?
You there? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, there might be just some slight delay. Um, could you put the link of the agenda again? Because when I joined, it was already gone. So, thank you. Okay, so uh, on Monday, the stuff is still rather old. So on Monday, we had the Geppetto meeting, which closed the sprint 28. So there is there are different things, and I will try to talk about them from the like from the OpenWorm point of view. There are different things that are ongoing on Geppetto, and that they are captured on the board here. So there is basically a refactoring which is ongoing both on the back end and on the front end to better expose the kind of data that are being simulated. So that are being simulated in any kind of simulator, in particular with the neural one, which is currently JLAMS, and it will also impact the SPH particle simulation. And by exposing better what is happening, I mean that there is basically work which is ongoing in order for basically not just present the states that are the results of the simulation just as sort of key value pairs to some extent as it was happening, but to distinguish between different type of data which can be found in a model, say for instance in a neural file, and also different type of data that would be simulated. This will enable, from the user perspective, this will enable basically from the user perspective to be able to do more with this data. So at the moment we do have things like plotting, but we obviously want to move, for instance, towards being able to have more interactivity with the simulation and with the model, so that, for instance, the user can get report that they can change a parameter so that they can affect the simulation. And in order to do all of these works, there's different people now that are doing different bits and pieces. So that covers a lot of the stuff that you will see in the past sprint that was just closed this Monday, and in the new one that opened, which is the 29th. So there is on top of this stuff, there is effort that I suppose Johannes will talk about, still about the replaying of recordings, which is also something else that is ongoing at the moment. And I would just let Johannes talk about that. But that's another thing that is ongoing and that you will see there in the sprint. I've personally been doing a lot of the design and less of the coding in these past weeks. So it is basically designed to accommodate these new things that are happening, and which require quite a bit of thought before getting down to the code itself. And on top of that, also started working with Joe on the design for the worm sim. That will be a way to basically wrap Geppetto and offer more to basically explore and interact with all the OpenWorm models, with like the SPH1, with models like the C302, etc., etc., for which we already have a prototype. But like, in order to turn those simulations into something that can be more user friendly, into something that can be made interactive for the user, there's different things that we're looking at in order for how to design basically this extension and this and building these and building the worm cell on top of the Geppetto platform that is already being developed. So other than this, yes, I'm helping. Yeah, in general, I'm doing a lot to help all the contributors that are writing the code to Geppetto, doing a lot of one-on-one every other day, just to basically catch up with everything and try to keep all the development inside my head, so that I can know how to better make people interact, how to better plan the different features, so that we basically get the max out of it. And yeah, so everything. Again, for anybody that is interested in more details than the ones that I get to as part of this bi-weekly report in the OpenWorm project, just feel free to drop an email or something. If you would like to join the meeting that happens on Monday, it's like, as always, open to everyone who is interested. So if that is the case, just let me know. And unless I'm forgetting something, that is pretty much all.
Okay. Awesome. All right, let's go on to Giovanni.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So last 2 weeks, dealing with the Kickstarter aftermath, as in making sure that people are filling out the surveys, and if you have not filled out yours, please do.
My mom wants to know when she's getting her T-shirt.
We're shipping end of July, so she should get it sometime in August. The challenge now is basically there's around 90 people who haven't filled out the survey, so more than sending them loads of emails, we cannot do because we don't know where they live. So that's what's going on now. Basically, pinging people, please fill it out, and hoping that they do it, because there's a risk, which is basically replace the order, send the stuff, and then people wake up after a month, and it's not as easy if you're not ordering in bulk. It's like it's a bit, you have to do it twice basically. But we'll deal with it. But it would be just nice that we have all the surveys in before we place the orders. But see how that goes. There's only so much we can do. And then we started committee meetings. Some activity on the core members list about that. Then, yeah, I was saying, based on when the surveys come in, planning to ship their physical rewards towards the end of July. One aspect of that is t-shirts and posters. Another aspect is stickers. So I was working with Matteo a few days ago just to place the order for the stickers. They're pretty cool. If anybody wants to see them, okay, Michael. If anybody wants to see the stickers, just we'll probably post them, circulate them. It's on the mailing list. So what else? So that's as far as the Kickstarter. There's gonna be another Kickstarter community meeting soon. I will schedule that this week. I will send out a poll, and again, anybody wants to get involved, just let me know. I started writing some code again on Geppetto. I have an issue assigned to me that it's about wrapping, basically rerouting camera controls to the console so that you can move the camera around from the console. That's almost done. Just having an issue kind of troubleshooting away the last bits. It works, just doing things twice when you push the buttons. So I haven't had time to chase that down. I'd say it's 95% there. And then, as Matteo was mentioning, I started working in terms of the WormSim architectural design, as in how does that integrate with the existing Geppetto code base, because one way would be just to pick up and duplicate everything, but that wouldn't be very nice. So we're trying to find a way, can we make Geppetto customizable so that basically there's no forking involved, and so forth. So there's a lot of that going on at the moment. And there's cards popping up on GitHub, so you can follow it. Because if you investigate this technology, investigate that technology, cards related to that. As soon as we have something concrete, we'll share design documents with everybody. And that's pretty much me. Unless anybody has any questions, that's all from me.
Very cool. You happy to be back coding again?
Yeah. What was it? Like 2 days ago, I actually wrote some code. Haven't happened in a few months due to the Kickstarter stuff that was on. I was quite happy about that.
Awesome. Very good. All right, let's go on to Porig.
Okay. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, I've been looking at a few things, but most of these are in some way related to NeuroML, which is what I'm spending most of my time working on, particularly JNeuroML, to try to ease the types of models that it can export. For example, with JNeuroML, you can run Neuron. You can import NeuroML2 files now and add options -run -no GUI, and it will do things like compile the mod files. And if you say no GUI, it will just run the script, save it in the background, and hopefully make this as easy as possible to run NeuroML2 files through JNeuroML. This is also obviously relevant for C302. So the idea there is that you get a set of Python scripts which will generate the NeuroML and LEMS files automatically based on a very small subset of parameters. And once these NeuroML files are generated, you ideally don't want to have to look at the Neuron code, and you want to make sure that it will run in Neuron with a simple command and ideally produce the same as running it natively in JNeuroML. So most of that is there at the moment. We've been adding a few tests to make sure that the results are identical in JNeuroML and Neuron, or at least within a certain tolerance. And this is obviously related to what Tom has been requesting, which is the ability to add into the C302 generated network the ability to specify change specific sets of connections. So now you can add that you want connection between two sets of neurons scaled by a certain amount, and you can override them. And we just had a discussion about what to do with the gap junctions. So I'll probably get around to that, replying to it in the next day or two, but probably the general consensus was that gap junctions ideally are modeled as gap junctions, but probably for the first approximation for the next few months, we will, you can just set it as a specific synaptic strength, and you can either set that to 0 or put in a value which may or may not cause those connections to act like real gap junctions. But again, the whole network itself is an approximation of the behavior. So it's our first approximation. So it's a rough approximation of gap junctions as well. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit more, what Tom's requirements are when he gives his update. I've also been giving a quick look at OpenWorm. There are some pull requests still open for modifications of C302 and some of the other neuroconstruct code, but I'm really waiting until there's a stable release. I mean, it's looking good, does most of what's needed, but I need to. It would be best to integrate that once there is a stable release, or at least an official alpha release of C302. But at the same time, what's there seems to be fine, but I'm just concerned to make sure that the data in the neuroconstruct project in C302 that's being pulled from the spreadsheet is identical, or at least roughly the same as what's in OpenWorm. And obviously, longer term, it would be best to take that from OpenWorm, but I just want to do some tests initially to see what might be different and what might have been changed over the last few months.
Yeah, can I just say one thing on that?
Sure. Yeah.
We're getting a little bit of echo on this end. But sorry, can you mute this? Hearing itself this one. Yeah. Mark is spending a while on a branch. Called 0.5, and I think we'll be looking to finalize it and close it. Close it project en masse towards the end. So some of those changes will happen in a month or two, probably. But it's there right now. Until then. But the changes that are coming after that are we're going to move forward in a big way. Just
Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, as I say, what's there seems to be quite adequate for C302, but it'll just be a little bit of while before that gets directly into the pipeline. But it should be fairly independent for anybody using C302, but some of the values might be slightly different. But the Python interface for C302 and running the code should be identical. The other thing that I mentioned probably in some of the issues was I was just keen to make sure that there's one single very short A4 page which just summarizes where the data in OpenWorm has come from. I haven't actually checked to see if there's an update on that issue, but that's another thing I'd be keen on, just to make sure that there's a nice, clean, easy-to-read summary of whose data, which lab, focused on people and labs, which is what C. elegans physiologists will be interested in, rather than they don't want to see XML or DF, anything like that. They want to see names of people they like. And I think that would be very good for encouraging usage of OpenWorm. The last quick thing I've been looking at is I've been doing a quick test of Cybernetic. I managed to get it installed on my laptop and my desktop. With minor modifications, I had to use the AMD libraries, but it did work. But when I tried it on the master branch, the only problem was that it uses the cube of elastic matter that Geppetto was working with. I think that's because they were testing sharing models and configurations with Geppetto, but the worm itself has vanished. So I'm sure it's lurking someplace in different branches, but I just wanted, but unfortunately none of the Russian guys are here to check where that is, but I'd be quite keen to get a working version of that I could actually look at the worm and then dig into how best to integrate with the Python, maybe a Python version of the C302.
Yeah, this might be good to file.
That's it.
Okay. I'm going to put you on mute there. All right. I wanted to say as well that I'm a big fan of the use case that's coming out of the work that Tom's doing in terms of refining the C302 library, and I'm really glad for the interaction and seeing it on the list. Actually, Rainer, if you don't mind, you mind if I move Tom's update up now, actually? Because I think it could actually go nicely after Porgs.
Okay, no worries.
Okay. So Tom, I've seen a lot of good activity there. Tell me how things are going on that stuff. I'll try to put.
All right. Hello, everyone. As Patrick mentioned, I'm working with him to incorporate the C302 simulation into the network training algorithm that I've been working on for quite a while, that I think most people are familiar with to some degree. And so Patrick's made some changes that I'm going to incorporate, so this thing is kind of happening in waves a little bit. While he's been doing some weighting kind of modifications, so you can tune things and train things with C302, I went ahead and did some direct incorporation of the neuron tool into the training algorithm, the BioNet training algorithm, just using the pharyngeal neuron set, which is only about 20 neurons. So I think that's a good start. Eventually, I'd like to move into the neurons that actually run the locomotion behavior. So I'm pretty close to getting ready to test that, and so the next thing to do is to kind of get the C302 stuff in there, and then, as I said, from there move up to a larger set of neurons. I think, as I said, the locomotion seems to be a good target. So we're trying to, and then also Stephen mentioned that there's using the Python interface to neuron is probably maybe a better way to do things. I got to look at that too. So anyway, things are kind of moving along slowly, but they're still moving. And like I said, within a couple days, I'll be able to actually run something and see if something happens. You know, so we'll get a more realistic, you know, biologically authentic simulation of the connectome and see if we can train that. So that's pretty much where I'm at. If there's any questions.
One question. So, how are you integrating it with Neuron today?
While I was waiting for Patrick to come up with this thing, I went ahead and yes, I parsed the Hawk file, the Neuron Hawk file, and I know that's a fragile thing and probably not a good long-term solution, but I did it anyway. So I can actually textually grab the weights out of there because I could see them, and I've got an API for that. So I parsed it into a what I call a Hawk doc. So it's kind of like a, you know, an HTML doc type thing, and so you can manipulate the weights and write them back out into a file, and then you can run Neuron in them. And so you have a whole bunch of subdirectories. Each thread is in its little directory running its version of the Hawk file with the Neuron simulator. At least that's what's going to happen real soon. So that basic plan is going to also happen, but we're going to be using the C302 thing shortly. So, but I'd like to just see what happens. You know, I have trouble just waiting. I have to go ahead and try stuff out. You know, so so that's what I did. There you are.
Good for you. Get extra dedication points for hacking Hawk.
Yeah, well, you know, it's not easy, but and I'm sure it is actually very fragile. Because although I don't know much about the language, but I think it's a pretty old language. It's been around since the early '90s, from what I've heard. So maybe it's not going to change too much soon. I don't know. Yeah. But it's not a long-term solution. I agree.
I don't think it's going to change soon, but yeah, I mean, one of the other reasons for kind of trying to encourage just using the Python and NeuroML interface is that that mapping from NeuroML to Hawk can definitely be improved. Even the mod files with the channels and the decounterating fire mechanisms, all that is just a first approximation to try to get it working. And ideally, you shouldn't want to worry about looking at the Hawk and mod, and I mean, maybe even it could run faster in Genesis or something like that. So if you can eventually develop your tools around C302, then all the rest is behind the scenes, just a generic mapping from neural network to neuron, which can maybe one day become faster. And so, but I mean, if you do need to do stuff sooner than looking at the hop file, I mean, it's perfectly fine. I mean, it works perfectly well, but it's just a bit messy to find out where everything's set.
Okay. Thanks. Did you mention? Did I hear Genesis? Remember, I'm kind of a newcomer with the tools here. So if you've got, be proactive.
No, I mean,
I can go look them up and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would concentrate. You're probably fine concentrating on Neuron for the time being. I mean, any of these other simulators like Neuron and Moose have somewhat similar features. They have their own formats and so on, but Neuron is probably the most actively developed and most widely used at the moment. So it's probably sufficient to worry about that for the time being.
Okay, great.
There's a link there for Genesis, and you can also search for Moose as well. So yeah, there's a handful of neural simulators that have been around for a little while. That's one of them. Okay, since we were talking about Neuron and things related to that, I think that dovetails quite nicely into Rainer and his update. And Rainer, I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have any of the graphs that you're generating, maybe not immediately at the moment, but that you want to share screen and show people, and just explain briefly what we've been doing, I think it's actually very educational to give folks a sense of it, in addition to explaining it with words. But I'll let you decide.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, we've been working on modeling the muscle cells, and in our last meeting we got quite far with visualizing what we're doing with the ion channels in the muscle cell membrane. And as we said before, we're using a paper by Jordan Boyle and Netta Cohen as a jumping off point here. The muscle model repository contains some NeurML2 files describing each of the channels described in the Boyle and Cohen paper, and we've got a channel analysis script from the Blue Brain project that takes a NeurML channel file and then creates a LEMS file that we can feed to JNeurML to generate a series of graphs. I mean, I can screen share and show you those now because I've got the generated files already ready.
Cool.
So I'll just share my desktop, and what gives us is that gives us is things like graphs of current and fractional conductance for ion channel at different voltage clamp potentials, as well as the behavior of the ion channel activation and inactivation variables over time. Okay. So what I'm doing at the moment is extending the channel analysis script to log the peak and steady state currents at a given voltage clamp value, so we can plot the current to voltage relationships like the one shown in Figure 3 of the paper to see how close we are to modeling the actual behavior we see in experimental results from the worm itself, which is what we've got in Figure A and B here. So yeah, that basically describes, yeah, I don't know if that's a good enough description of what we're working on at the moment, but that's, yeah.
No, it's good.
Yeah, so that's, yeah, that shows you what yeah, what we're doing at the moment, and yes, so we can actually see what we're modeling now.
Yeah, it's probably quick for folks that haven't gotten deep into the channel dynamics yet, but at the highest level, what neuroscientists do in their experiments is measure the dynamics of cells, and that's driven by the dynamics of ion channels. And in the lab, you can do what's called electrophysiology, and you can measure things like current-voltage relationships of cells and their individual channels. And because of a lot of these nice JLEMs and NeurML tools that are written in Python and that have been supported by the NeurML project, and a lot of them actually Porrig personally, I see his name in a lot of stuff, we're able to do virtual electrophysiology, and that's great because then we can go to papers where these things are actually measured for real and match up the dynamics of the channels with what is reported in the actual literature. And this is like some pretty hardcore computational neuroscience type approaches to building models that are more detailed, conduction-based models. But this is all stuff that would go into the muscle model, go into C302, and that whole approach. And that's very nice. And I think the thing that we're trying to extend now is the one thing that the scripts don't do yet, but we're thinking about how we can basically augment the script is to actually generate a straight-up IV curve, because we basically have all the other pieces needed for that already in the script, and now maybe go one step further. And because the IV curve is literally the thing that you find in these papers. So yeah, so I'm as I said before, I think this progress is really good, and reviving the muscle model, which had been kind of which had been left a little bit for a few minutes quiet before we ended that. So. All right.
Could I just recommend, Rina, maybe if you put an example of what you're trying to do on a GitHub repository. I mean, there's various different ways you could go about trying to get that current through the ion channel. One potential way is actually modify the lens definitions of the channels so that it exposes the current. Or there are other ways that you could do it to make a cell which maybe reads the conductance, reads the current coming through the individual ion channel. So, I mean, the best thing you could do is maybe just set up a separate GitHub repository, just copy over the various bits of code from the NeurML, the NeurML definitions and the analysis scripts from the Channelpedia project, put those into a single location and try to get something there which is running, which is done, like you just showed us here, that I can actually just have a look at and test, and then I can recommend, okay, well, maybe if you modify this particular script, then you can get it to run locally, or you can expose and generate some of those plots that you showed of there. That might be a better approach rather than trying to develop completely independently. Just a suggestion.
Okay. Well, I can fork I can make a fork of the code and push what I've already done up to that at the end of the day, and then put a link to that in the issued comments, if that would be useful.
That's good. Perfect.
That's good. Yeah, I'll copy you both in on that.
Sorry, Porg. Every time you're off mute and somebody else is talking, it's like an echo chamber. So, do you want to say that again one more time, Rainer? The last thing.
Okay. Yeah. I'll fork the repository for that and push what I've already done up to my fork on GitHub, and then send you a message via the issue reports. Just copy you in on a comment with a link to what I've done.
Okay. Awesome. Good stuff. All right. So now next is Michael on behalf of Jim and Michael.
Hello. Yeah, so I have some very good news for this meeting. I can announce that all our features code has been translated. That's been an effort ongoing for about 6 months now, so I'm very happy about that. And we're still validating that the results are correct as we did in the MATLAB case, but we're pretty close to validating that, and we're also moving on to translating the statistics code. So I think that's very positive steps there. And I think, Stephen, you were mentioning that you wanted sort of access points for the volunteers, and this might be an area where someone with both MATLAB and Python experience could contribute, because there are various entry points here that could work. Really, any of the source files could be sort of translated without knowing every piece of the whole project for movement validation. So if there's someone that wants to step in and do something, then that's certainly an area they could do that in. And Jim actually had a question, because he's working more closely on this aspect than I am, but Jim asked me to ask, I think, Matteo, the save features to disk sort of integration piece with Geppetto is. Matteo, do you have any information for us on that one?
Yeah, that's related to what Johannes is working on, and we will give an update later.
Okay.
But yeah, basically there's been progress. As in, if you remember last time, one thing that we said is that it's like the pure development had paused for a bit as we were trying to find a way to work together with the other group in Poland that had already that was already working basically on a recording format very similar to what we were defining in Geppetto. So the good news is that now we have found a way to move forward, as in a way to basically an agreed format that will be the focus now for the development. So, and this is something that happened as of just last week. Okay.
Cool. Okay, I'm predicting the future here. I'm seeing Johannes' update is going to be about NSDF, so I'm excited to hear about that then. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Okay, cool. Okay, so the other future step I should discuss is what we were mentioning earlier, that potentially adding SciUnit hooks into the movement validation repo, and that would be with Rick Gerken. So the next step there would be the Journal Club, and some other stuff down the line for release 7. But for now, we're pretty happy that the features code is translated, and we, Jim and I, are hoping to get the whole repository translated sooner rather than later. But at least having that, yeah, basically, if we could get features and statistics translated, then we could get a lot closer to that fitness function ideal to really have some deliverable that can connect full circle with the rest of the project. And so that's our update for this week.
Okay. All right, awesome. So I'd like to get a chance to go in there and see the code and run it as well. And you guys have a set of unit tests that are in there as well, or? Yeah.
So I mean, the whole framework is a testing framework for OpenWorm, I suppose. But we also, of course, we're trying to test the testing framework, if you will. So that's really what we're doing here. Is we have a file from the Schaefer lab that is the worm data, and then we have a file from the Schaefer lab that is their generated features data, and then we compare the two. We compare the features file to our generated features file, the file that we generate with our code, and it almost matches, but there's a couple of differences right now. Little off by one things, or maybe there's anyway little differences. So we're investigating those and making sure that it's all exactly the same. So that's the unit testing of the testing framework that I'm talking about. And if you run Jim_test, you'll get that So that's in the root directory of the repository.
The Jim underscore test. Oh, good.
Yes.
Where's the Michael underscore test? Is that?
Well, see, we both had them, but Jim's was a little farther along. So then I just started working on Jim's. So now it's still called Jim underscore test. So don't let the name fool you. It's both. Both of us.
Good. I don't want to see you left out, Michael.
Would there be an Easter egg if we do Michael underscore test?
maybe we should set that up. Lots of Easter eggs in the testing framework. Yeah.
Make the worm crawl or something. I don't know.
That's right.
Okay. Very cool. Okay. Ready to move on to Johannes? Ted?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the first update is about what Matteo just spoke about a bit. So we've been talking with a group from Poland to create a common data format for neuroscience simulations, and well, to use that to store or to record a simulation in Geppetto and store it to a file. And yeah, as of last week, we have more or less agreed with them now on a format. And yeah, and Matteo, I have roughly made the plan to how to implement all that and what I'll be doing in the next week. So that's all spread over the Waffle Board for Geppetto, if you want to have a look at that. Basically, there's 3 steps. The first is to write an API in Python that can write this MSDF format. It can write a file in this format. That will probably be also the interesting thing for you, Michael. And yeah, so that's more or less the first thing I actually want to have a look at, but I can't really give you a time plan because well, that will probably be the point where guys from this Polish group will also work on a lot. So yeah, we'll have to see how to coordinate that. Yeah, then the second point will be to write in Java something for Geppetto that can read the MSDF file. And yeah, load all the things up in Geppetto so that you can replay them. And the last point will be more or less this, what actually was the objective for summer coding, to write some modules in Python that can transform recordings from some neural simulators to our recording format, which is now MSDF. Yeah, I think we've more or less agreed on Neuron and Prime now. Yeah, to do some files that can transform recording from Neuron and Prime to MSDF.
So,
okay. Yeah.
Just a question for both you and Matteo to sort of help me remember here. So, if I'm not mistaken, so NSDF is this format originally designed for saving the results of neuronal simulations, which means either probably event times of spikes or changes in membrane potential originally, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But then it's written using HDF5, right? Okay. And then we wanted to have a recording format that didn't just do neuronal simulations, although that was one thing, but that we could potentially do, yes, but that we could potentially do other kinds of recording on as well. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have kind of pushed the format into being a little bit more domain agnostic. So the thing we have agreed on now is that basically the format that actually stores the format basically stores time series and static variables and all these kinds of things, which are not really related or fixed to neuroscience, and yeah, and then probably on top of this, more or less, there will be like some API methods which store more neuroscience specific things. That the basic format is not restricted to neuroscience.
And this is how we could also send the state of the worm, the skeleton of the worm in 3 dimensions changing over time as well. And that's why it's relevant to this previous question that Michael was just asking about saving the state. Is that the thinking?
Exactly, yeah. So that will also be possible.
Basically, just to add one thing that from the outside can look confusing, given that our requirement is to be domain agnostic, is that this thing is called neuroscience simulation data format, and then it's at the very least legit to ask the question, hey, we don't need only neuroscience. But the reason why, like, I raised this point with them, and the reason why there is an N in front of the simulation, what otherwise would be just called simulation data format, is more political than anything else. So it's just like brand-wise, that's a name that they have, but there's nothing in there that is really neuroscience specific. So we can call it something else internally, like SDF.
But maybe we'll have to raise that point again.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's up to you guys. Personally, I'm not asking. It's less about the name and just more to make sure that we're all clear on what it can be used for. So if it's just so that the usage is clear. But
yeah, no, this is just clear. I'm also just a big fan of calling the name things with the right name, so that's why it kind of.
I totally leave that to you. Yes, I understand. Okay. All right. Very good.
And one short update. So that's something so maybe you remember that there were some instructions how to load and build all the Geppetto source code for OS X and Linux. And like since 2 weeks ago or so, I guess I have gone through all that and and modified the scripts a bit to also run on Windows or to actually run on all operating systems. So there is I don't know if I still got, or does someone have the link to the OS X Linux instructions? So it's somewhere in the Geppetto docs, I guess.
Geppetto build instructions? Yeah. I just put those up pretty recently. Geppetto.org. And then OS X Linux setup. This?
Yeah, that's it. So if you go through that, you'll find somewhere that there's one folder which is called OS X utils, I think, which contains the original scripts that load all the things, the source code and everything. And I've created a directory which is also in the Geppetto repository, which is called all OS utils, and that contains the modified scripts which should run on all operating systems. And so I've already tested them on Windows, and they work, and they would need to be tested on OS X and Linux now. I think it should not be a big deal, but just to know that there's no errors or anything in that. And so if anyone wants to help with that, it's very welcome. I think Matthias also linked the issue.
Okay.
And or it may also be worth just something for if you have any volunteers who want to go for Geppetto and maybe are on Windows, then that would be a good way to have this test out, and you can also direct them into my direction if they have any problems with that.
If I can, something that you guys remembered, reminded me about is that now there is this effort to consolidate the documentation for Geppetto that Steven has been helping a lot on. So basically, because before we had documentation scattered a bit all over with the wikis, with the original Google Docs, and with some stuff that we were starting to put in these docs, and now everything is moving into these docs. There's still work to do in order to consolidate everything, but this will be the ultimate place with documentation both for the users and for the developers, with all the kind of things that you need to know, no matter what it is that you're doing. And this documentation is also what is linked from inside Geppetto, so that for people that are just using Geppetto, they click on the docs button, and this is where they are brought up to. So this is just something else that is ongoing.
All right, very good. Okay, so I think it's a little bit of a.
Sorry, could I just ask a quick question?
Yes.
Sure.
It's about the NSDF format. Is there a repository with some examples of working examples of this? And the second question is, have you figured out which Java library is best to read and write HDF5 that can be used with Maven?
Yeah. So there is a repository which contains kind of a very basic API to write this, but that's like the previous version of the format. So that's from the poster. That's actually the same that they had in mind. That it's probably going to change quite a lot. And the other question, with the Java library. So I've tested, I think, all of them that are available. And the only one, so the basic problem is that in order to kind of dereference the format, we get to read some very specific attributes from the HDF5 file. And the only one that I found that could read that is the Java HDF object package. So that's kind of what materials are actually showing. I can also link the HDF. So I basically tried first the NetCDF library. That didn't work at all. Then JHDF5, but that also contains some errors when I tried to read these attributes. The Java HDF object package is was not finally successful to use that to read the attributes that we need. And I think that will probably be the library that we'll be using in the end. Also, I first want to look at the API now to write NSDF and see whether anything comes up that we need to consider for the Java library.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I would recommend that a first priority would be to make sure that you can get some examples out there which show what you want to contain in a file like that, and get examples of libraries that can read and write in both Java and Python, because if you can't get those in the short term, then it might be best looking at a different route. I think having examples, having a simple script to validate this, having a simple script to read and write, it should be top priority, and it should be something if there isn't a Java library that can read and write this format, then I mean, there's lots of packages that won't actually be able to use it. And if it is a case that their example files are using features of HDF that are difficult to implement, I mean, it might be the case that you just have to use simpler structures in there. And again, as long as you have an example that can be written and read with easy to obtain libraries in Java, then I think that would be really important.
That's exactly what Johannes is working on right now, to make sure that we can read from Java these recordings. So from Java it won't be as much as writing them. So the focus is mostly on reading them from Java and writing them from Python. Writing from Python, it's safe because that already happened basically. So of course we need to compile examples to show some examples how the API would work, which is exactly, if you look at the Waffle Board, that's exactly, they update the API to write a recording in an SDF that card that Johannes is assigned to. So that's exactly what is happening. And then if you look at the Sprint 30, you will see the following thing, which is the other half of the story, which is reading the recording from Geppetto, which is what Johannes was prototyping now with the HDF object package. And I've seen that, Johannes, I have a question for you, a quick one, unless the answer is long. It's basically for this HDF object package. I've seen that there's been some recent update, like 20th of February. But basically, did you have to install the C binaries in order to use this, or everything is contained in the jar file that they give?
Can't really answer that because I use the Windows installer. So the thing is that but the people who are developing this library, they are also developing this HDF viewer, which you use to view and edit an HDF file. So they have somehow put the HDF viewer and the library files into one package or one installer basically. And yeah, so I've used this installer now for Windows. I don't know how it is for OS X or Linux, how the files look there. Yeah, and that kind of copies all the jar files and so on. But so the installation process, I've also written this on the issue just an hour ago. There obviously are some difficulties with installing this library. I also had some problems at first, but yeah, so we'll have to look how to use it.
Because that's gonna be an important thing for us. Like, we cannot use anything that it's basically not going to be self-contained in a jar file, which is going to be a Maven dependency that then can be taken down, because otherwise you cannot go on different operating systems having to install stuff before you can work with that specific library. So that is a requirement. That is a requirement to keep in mind, which is the reason why at the start I went with the library that was in Geppetto, because that one was self-contained, and then I managed to get to make also the other one that you were suggesting the other day self-contained, and I put that in the Geppetto Maven repository, but that also doesn't work. Now this one, we need to make sure once again that it can be self-contained in a jar and that it can be used, because we cannot basically we cannot install anything on a system if it's not a dependency that comes from Maven and that is just pulled down automatically and just used out of the box on any operating system. So if HDF object uses if this library uses basically native libraries, there is a way to bundle native libraries in a jar file, but it's a rather painful process that unless they're doing it, it might be a bit too much for us, but it might be the only way. So we need just to make sure that it can work with a jar file like that.
Okay, yeah, I'll look into it.
Cool. All right. Anybody want to see something cool for a minute before we go? Just real quick. I've been doing some research for the for upcoming journal club, and I was looking at motor neurons in the worm browser, and I realized that the circuitry is complicated enough. I wanted to make a couple movies, so I isolated these different families of the motor neurons, and just kind of looking at them individually. And so, just to give you a little flavor, these are the VB motor neurons. The B motor neurons are some of the last resorts of doing locomotion, and looking at them all together here is pretty interesting. They actually kind of line up in a row. So VB1 is at the head and VB11 is at the tail, and they're all kind of nicely ordered. I'm also conscious of the fact that John White was the one who codified the naming system of these things, so we also kind of owe him this like nice little pattern. And then so that's VB, and this is what DB looks like. So V in the other case stands for ventral, which is along the bottom side, and the DB are they're B motor neurons, but they go to the dorsal side. And what you see that's interesting here about how they're different, sort of look at the transparency with the worm there, is that they collect they integrate information along the ventral cord, but then they send information by looping over the bottom up to the top, and they talk to the motor neurons that are up on the dorsal side that way. And there again, they're numbered from head to tail, 1 through 7. But in this case, you notice it's 7 and not 11. So the ones that are the dorsal ones are actually far fewer than the ones that are on the ventral side. But they stimulate the muscles on the other side. So I've been kind of going through these different classes as they've been described in this paper, just to understand how they work and how they're laid out in 3D space. And I realized that we never really looked at that before. So I don't know. I've just been having fun exploring these, and hopefully what I want to do after this is to kind of look at the connections, the cross connections between these, because some of the additional things talk about how some of the neurons are inhibitory and how some of them one inhibits the other, and so I kind of want to play with some of these combinations of circuits. So if anything, is a preview for the journal club that I'll do on neurobiology of locomotion coming forward, which, by the way, I've invited Netta Cohen to, and hopefully we'll get some of the folks from the other paper that have been talking about it as well. So kind of diving into the circuitry, but okay, cool. So something to leave you with for the next couple of weeks. So thanks, guys. I'll be touching base with those of you individually I haven't touched base with yet, and we'll do another one in 2 weeks. And obviously I will see you guys on GitHub issues and emails and all that stuff. All right?
Oh,
Cheers, guys.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Yep.
Bye.